After a comment from a barber, I decided to take a paternity test for my son and felt guilty about it. The results hit me like a brick. Now she's begging me to stay for our son's sake. I met Rose in college. We crossed paths during our junior year of college. Both engineering majors, we often ended up in the same lectures and study groups. Rose was sharp, methodical, and had a dry sense of humor that clicked with mine. What started as shared notes and coffee breaks gradually evolved into a relationship. It wasn't a dramatic romance, more a logical progression of two people who made sense together. After graduation, we both secured jobs in the same city. Moving in together was a practical decision. Splitting rent, sharing expenses, etc. A few years into our careers, Rose brought up the idea of starting a family. We had a thorough discussion about finances, career implications, and lifestyle changes. Soon enough, Rose was pregnant, and she gave birth to Max. Holding Max for the first time was transformative. I'd always approached life with logic and planning, but this tiny human introduced an unexpected depth of emotion. I found myself adjusting my routines, taking on midnight feedings, and genuinely enjoying watching him grow. Diapers, first words, first steps, I was there for all of it. When Max was 5, I took him to a new barbershop. The barber casually mentioned that Max didn't look much like me. I brushed it off at first, but the comment lingered. Maybe it was because a recent event where a friend of a friend found out his daughter wasn't biologically his was on my mind. My friend had been discussing it with me. Over the following weeks, I started noticing small differences. His eye color was different, and his features didn't quite match mine or Rose's in the way you'd expect. I felt a bit foolish letting the barber's words affect me, but I thought there was no harm and this would dispel my suspicions. I'm not one to let uncertainties fester. Without mentioning anything to Rose, I decided to get a paternity test. I turned it into a fun science project with Max, swabbing our cheeks and sending the samples off. Part of me felt guilty, but I needed to know. When the results came back, they hit me like a ton of bricks. 0% probability of paternity. Max wasn't my biological son. That evening, after Max was asleep, I showed Rose the test results. She went pale, then defensive, denying any possibility of a mix-up at the hospital. Eventually, she admitted she'd had an affair around the time Max was conceived. At first, she claimed it was with a colleague. We'd met a few times at company events. But as the conversation continued, she broke down and confessed that the real father was her ex-boyfriend. She'd reconnected with him briefly during a rough patch we had 5 years ago. I sat there processing her words. Trust, something I valued deeply, had been shattered. Rose pleaded, saying it was a one-time mistake, that she'd wanted to tell me but couldn't bring herself to risk what we had. I told her that now it was all over. She confessed that Mark wasn't well settled and wasn't earning much. She feared that without me, Max wouldn't have the stable life we'd planned for him. She kept begging me to stay, saying it was for Max's sake, that he needed me as the father he'd always known. She proposed that we could move past this, that our family didn't have to break apart. But I couldn't ignore the fact that our relationship was built on a lie, and staying together out of convenience or fear didn't sit right with me. So it was over, no doubt about that. I needed to understand where I stood, so I consulted a lawyer. Legally, since my name was on Max's birth certificate, I was recognized as his legal father with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. This meant I had the right to seek custody or visitation but also the obligation to provide child support. The lawyer explained that in our state, contesting paternity after 5 years is challenging but possible under certain circumstances, especially in cases of fraud or misrepresentation. If successful, I could disestablish paternity, relieving me of legal rights and responsibilities toward Max. Emotionally, I was torn. I'd been Max's father in every way that counted, but knowing he wasn't biologically mine changed things. The betrayal by Rose made it hard to see the situation clearly. After much contemplation, I decided to contest paternity. Amidst all this, Rose informed me that Mark had reached out. Apparently, one of her friends spilled the beans and Mark wanted to be involved in Max's life. I met with Mark. We had a direct conversation. He apologized sincerely, stating he had no idea about Max's existence. Mark admitted he wasn't in the best financial position but was determined to step up and be a father to Max. He assured me he didn't want to disrupt Max's life but wanted to do right by his son. Update. After weeks of sleepless nights and endless internal debates, I made the toughest decision of my life. For my own mental health, I chose to go no contact with Max. It was an agonizing choice, but I realized that continuing in his life might cause more confusion for him and prolonged pain for me. I proceeded with legally disestablishing paternity. With the evidence of the paternity test and Rose's admission, the court granted my petition. I was no longer recognized as Max's legal parent, absolving me of parental rights and responsibilities. Before stepping away, I wrote a letter to Max, to be given to him when he's older. I explained that my decision was not a reflection of him but a complicated adult situation. I wanted him to know that I cared for him deeply. It's been several months since I moved into my own place and went no contact. I've thrown myself into work and am trying to rebuild my life. The silence is deafening at times, and I miss the daily routines we shared. Rose and Mark have started co-parenting. From what I gather, Mark is doing his best despite his financial situation. He's genuine in his efforts to be a good father, and that gives me some peace of mind. I've arranged with Mark to receive periodic updates about Max. We agreed that while I won't be involved directly, knowing that Max is doing well helps me cope. It's a small consolation, but it's something. The betrayal still stings deeply. Trust isn't something I give easily, and having it broken so profoundly isn't something I can just get over. Going no contact with Max was the hardest part, but I believe it was the right decision for both of us. Staying might have led to more confusion and hurt in the long run. As for Max, I hope he's adjusting well. Kids are resilient, and he's surrounded by people who care about him. Mark's involvement seems positive, and Rose, regardless of how she is as a partner, is a good parent. Thank you for taking the time to read this, and to everyone who reached out via DMs and commented, I appreciate it.